Remember me. Remember me. Remember me. Remember me.
What the hell was that? Charles?
I don't know what you mean, Comrade Major. The chirper you found is broken and silent.
Atomic Heart is a first-person action game set in an alternate version of the USSR in the mid-1950s. The game offers a lot of positive aspects that make it an overall enjoyable experience. However, there are definitely some questionable design choices and user options missing from the final product that can't be glossed over and ignored. I'll just start off with that the game looks, sounds, and runs great. Heavily detailed environments and enemies help keep the game feeling fresh as you move from location to location. Each area is visually unique, though some switch themes a bit too often, particularly the beginning of the game. And some can be somewhat jarring, leaving you wishing that you had a bit more exposure to the areas you are fighting through. The effects of the weaponry, both visually on the enemy variety as well as their sounds, are pleasing to behold, not to mention the enemy's attacks and the audio design themselves. Nothing is done too overly much, and it hits the perfect spot on good sound design. The music is also done very well in the game as well, ranging from metal done by composers such as Mick Gordon, known for his work with the Doom series, to pop to opera, all present within Atomic Hearts. This is explained by a quantum radio that predicts and creates music based on what would be popular in the future. Now, I do have a few gripes here, as there are some pretty weird omissions from the game. There is no field of view slider. Now, I'm a person who likes to expand the field of view, as such narrow fields of vision can give me a bit of motion sickness and trigger a bit of my migraine symptoms of me, so at times I just had to take a break from looking and playing the game, as everything seemed too cramped for me. This, while playing on PC, that's not really acceptable with today's hardware that is available. So that really confused me, as most games on consoles do not have that option because you are working with limited hardware, whereas PCs, there is such variety that more than likely there is hardware that can support some options like that. Now, there's also built-in mouse acceleration, which I did not enjoy either, and it was something that I had to really get used to within the game. There's no actual way to turn this off, you just have to get used to mouse acceleration being something you're playing with in Atomic Heart. Also, there's no way to use Russian audio with English subtitles. The selection is either all Russian or all English, so this was also really weird to me, because I did want to enjoy playing the game in the native Russian language of the game with the subtitles just to read what was going on. These few omissions from the settings did definitely have me scratching my head. The combat in Atomic Hearts is definitely the standout feature of the game. It takes clear inspiration from BioShock, but with more of a focus on melee combat within the game. There are a multitude of different melee and ranged weapons, each with its own unique strengths and weaknesses that the player can use to fight against the various organic and robotic legions of enemies. The player can also use different glove abilities, such as Shock, which is an electrical ability, Mass Telekinesis, which is useful for lifting up enemies if you're being surrounded, Frostbite, which can freeze group of enemies in place, allowing you to safely do some damage with a few other side effects, Polymeric Jet, which allows you to apply a film to enemies, which you can then use to set different statuses on them much easier with some other effects, as well as a few character and utility upgrades, letting you use your abilities more, letting you carry more weight, have more health, typical stuff like that. All of the weapon and glove abilities can be upgraded as well to do more damage, have a special attack in the case of melee weapons, or a few of the ranged weaponry options, increase the status effects and how the consumables for those effects are used on the gun. A lot of these upgrades, particularly anything that's not outside of like a middle ground upgrade tree, are taken from blueprints, which are found in various locations called testing grounds. These are where you go for different challenges with different mini bosses, hordes of enemies to unlock. They're a little sidetrack from the main storyline and found out in the open world, which can be a fun little distraction from the main beats of the game. The best part of all of this crafting, though, is that if you craft a weapon or upgrades on the weapon that you don't like, you can disassemble the weapon and receive all of the crafting materials you used back. This also goes for any of your glove abilities or character upgrades as well. This system should just be the standard system across the board for any sort of single players that have crafting. It's great, it allows for a great time experimenting with different builds and playstyles within the game. The enemy variety itself is also impressive, including plant-based and mutated enemies with different abilities. Primarily, these are the organic enemies you will be fighting, as well as different various types of robots, which have probably the largest spectrum of enemies dealing with robots in a game I've ever seen. You have grenade launching robots that fight from a distance. You have little ball robots that act as turrets with both bullets and lasers. You have some that spin with 3 arms with sword-like appendages on them. You have some with buzzsaws that will charge you. You also have various flying enemies that you'll have to deal with that shoot lasers, guns, or repair other enemies as well. And let's not forget the oddly looking humanoid variety of enemies you'll have to fight as well that will primarily combat you in melee range. These all definitely provide a unique challenge, and the mix of enemy types at a time can really affect how you go about fighting groups of these enemies, really making you force a change to your strategy at the time. The boss fights also should really be said that they are all very unique and extremely fun to participate in. These are fought at various points throughout the game, typically at the end of a main story beat, so as you're leaving a specific lab or facility. And there's a couple here or there throughout the testing grounds as well. Though I didn't honestly go through all the testing grounds, as forcing to run through the open world is such a huge hassle. And part of that is because of the enemies. They can be needlessly spongy at times, which makes some encounters unnecessarily tedious and not even really more difficult, just more time consuming. Enemy respawn rates in the open world is also a huge hassle, and their incredible density make traversing it just unfun. And like I said, it had me to a point where I was just skipping entire areas of the open world, looking to get to the next point of the main story. The game does have other mechanics that do make it a bit more enjoyable. The various minigames for unlocking the locks on doors are a nice change in pace of change from combat, and while you do have a couple that are more of the typical lockpicking style, they're mostly little mini puzzles, something like Mastermind, finding the correct code where the buttons need to be pressed in the specific order, the specific pattern, or a specific timing. Then you do also have somewhere you just need to locate a cookie-looking key to use as well. Crafting is easy, with materials all being easy to come by and dropped and looted from everything, and looting a room with tons of interactable objects is something enjoyable all on its own. Just watching doors and cupboards fly open, drawers, bodies move around, stuff fly off of tables. It is a really satisfying and easy thing to do. No individually opening doors and selecting items to take. The ability to get a full refund for weapons and skills that you no longer need or just want to respec for a different zone. That is super convenient, and it encourages a ton of experimentation. However, needing to go through the open world to access the different testing grounds for specific blueprints, that can be a bit of a hassle, much like I've said, and I am really drawing on is that the open world for this game is the biggest detriment to it at all. It's just not a fun time to be had. While visually, the open world and surface of Facility 3826 is colorful and initially a welcome change from the claustrophobic hallways of the various underground facilities you do trudge through and fight through, it does have extremely glaring downsides to it. The surface is filled with an endless supply of enemies, making exploration frustrating at times, on top of repair drones which already can revive defeated enemies and seamlessly come from anywhere and everywhere. More constantly arrive via airdrop from delivery drones. Now, further in the game, there is a way to disable the robots on the surface in specific areas, but it is only a temporary disabling of them, and honestly, it's not really worth the effort. I found most of my time just dashing by enemy groups or running by them. Honestly, the open world portion of Atomic Heart just seems to be present, and another box on seemingly what a checklist of what games should have, and honestly it seems like it's just there to kind of bloat the game, making it a chore to slog through rather than a fun addition. Just as easily, exterior quarters could have been made to move the player from one location to the other with a little bit of exploration, but not the overwhelming amount of enemies present there. That would have still provided the same sort of tonal change from the underground claustrophobic facilities and provided you sort of an outside area to go through. but it's just not a good time to have. The distances you do need to traverse, they are to such a great extent that you have cars in the game that you can drive, and controlling a car is just terrible. It is not a good experience either. And so it really baffles me as to why the open world exists, because you do have a set order that you do have to go into the different laboratories or theater or any other sort of place that in the open world. So the open world just kind of exists to exist. There is no sprint either. So if your car breaks down, you are running at the same pace, occasionally dashing. So you will get hit by enemies, and you will get hit by enemies a lot. Most of the healing items I used was in the open world, just going from one place to another, from one story beat to a testing ground to a testing ground, back to the next story beats. So this open world is definitely, easily the worst part of the entire game. The story itself, however, is serviceable. By now, if you are interested in Atomic Heart, you know that it is set in alternate USSR in the mid-1950s. Germany, however, still has lost World War II, but before defeat, they set loose a bioengineered plague known as the Brown Plague on the world, that of which no country had the means of curing immediately, and it ravaged the world. During this time, a new substance known as polymer, which was a weird kind of plastic data storage substance, was discovered by a Soviet scientist, and which catapulted them to the forefront of scientific discovery and a leader of the free world after. Throughout the game, there are tons of lore pieces that you can find, primarily from data terminals going over different things that had been found and discovered. There are various audio logs you can pick up throughout the game and listen to about more current situation going on in Facility 3826 and issues that have arrived there. There are even some corpses you can speak to, some of which are for quests, some of which are just kind of there to talk to and get a little more insight into everything going on. You can speak pretty much actually to the memory echoes in their neural devices, one of which that you yourself have, which every character in the USSR at the time, as well as is being implanted into the world. The supporting characters of the game do actually add quite a variety to the world as well. And one particular does make an interesting and seemingly unhinged villain, though as the story goes on, it starts making more and more sense. All of the characters are written pretty well. One, however, is extremely crass, and I honestly hated going up to every upgrade station just in case it was her. She is known as Nora. It is an extremely vulgar and pointlessly sexual machine, spouting from blasting your polymer on her insides. It's extremely uncomfortable. I don't know why. Fortunately, all of the upgrade terminals are not like this. It is not every single upgrade terminal. It's just, I think every 4 or 5 you'll run into her. You could also just run back to the same one if you do need to deal with that as well. However, the story is overall entertaining, even with P3, the playable character, being as dense as plutonium himself, while catching on to what's happening in the world hours after the player yourself has. The twist itself is seen from a mile away, and one of the endings is sort of unsatisfying. The other one caused me to kind of scratch my head, as just saying, that's it? Overall, Atomic Heart is a very fun game that looks and runs great while still having a few flaws here or there. I definitely do think that it's still worth checking out despite these, considering if you do have a Games Pass, as Atomic Heart is available to anyone on the service. The combat is very reminiscent of that of BioShock and enjoyable, all held together by the various weapons and glove abilities available, which adds a great variety to the gameplay mixed in with the large enemy variety. The story is interesting enough and serviceable, with the world being incredibly detailed, both great to look at, with the alternate history that is fairly fleshed out, definitely leading me to believe that they do have plans for more games set in this alternate history in the future. But the open world portions of the games can make it a chore to continue on at times, so be warned there. I did not enjoy it at all, and there might be some people who do definitely enjoy that type of open world. Despite all of these flaws present, the lack of field of view, the omission of let me remove mouse acceleration, the open world itself, I do recommend booking a ticket to Facility 3826 and checking out what the Atomic Heart project is all about.